My wife coldly said, "I don't want to take care of a retired old man." She cheated, and my kids backed her to steal my wealth. I disappeared without a trace, and 5 years later, they begged me for help. My name is Ricardo Herrera. I am 62 years old, and for almost 3 decades, I was the chief financial officer of Industrias del Bajío, one of the largest manufacturing companies in Guadalajara. 30 years dedicating my life to spreadsheets, risk analysis, and decisions that moved millions of pesos. But my true passion was always my family. Lucia, my wife, and our children, Bruno and Monica, were the center of my existence. Every bonus I received, every salary increase, I thought of them first. When Bruno wanted to do his master's degree at the Tecnológico de Monterrey, I paid the 800,000 pesos without hesitation. When Monica decided to open that boutique in Polanco, I financed the initial 2 million. For Lucia, there was no limit. Trips to Europe, the new BMW every year, the house of our dreams in Las Lomas. I was always a reserved, analytical man. At the company, they called me the silent calculator. My calmness was my hallmark. In the last few months before retirement, however, something changed at home. Lucia seemed distant, always on the phone, whispering conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Bruno and Monica began to ask strange questions about inheritance, about my investments, about what would happen next. If you like stories of cold revenge and gripping twists, subscribe to the channel now. Here there are always unpublished stories, and each one is more shocking than the last. The day of my retirement party arrived. We organized something simple in the backyard of the house, just family and a few close friends. I was genuinely happy, thinking about the plans Lucia and I had made. Traveling the country in our new motorhome, visiting the grandchildren we hoped to have soon, maybe a little house in Puerto Vallarta for the winter. It was in the middle of the party that everything collapsed. Lucia approached me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She was carrying a manila envelope in her hands. "Ricardo," she told me, her voice as cold as the air conditioning in the middle of August, "I have a retirement gift for you." I opened the envelope, divorce papers. My vision blurred for a moment. I read the first lines: irreconcilable differences, division of assets, alimony. Lucia leaned in and whispered in my ear, "I do not want to take care of an old retired man, Ricardo. You understand, right?" I looked at her and then at our guests. It was then that I saw him. A man I did not recognize was standing near the gate, watching the scene with a smug smile. My eyes turned to Bruno and Monica. They did not seem surprised. In fact, they were exchanging glances with each other, as if sharing a secret. "You knew?" It was all I managed to say. Bruno shrugged. "Dad, you have to understand our position. Mom deserves to be happy, and we need to think about the future too." Monica nodded. "Your investments, the company, all of that is a lot to manage. Maybe it is better to leave it in the hands of someone who understands better." At that moment, everything became clear. It was not about Lucia's happiness. It was about money. My money. They thought that at 62 years old, I would be an easy prey. The old retired man who would sign any paper, who would divide everything without question, who might even conveniently die in a few years, leaving them with the full inheritance. But they did not know Ricardo Herrera, the chief financial officer. They only knew Ricardo Herrera, the dedicated husband and father. I folded the papers calmly and put them in my pocket. "All right," I said. "I am just going to sign." The party continued, but I was mentally absent. I watched Lucia laughing with the strange man. I saw my children whispering to each other, probably dividing my fortune before I had even signed the papers. They did not know that in the last 5 years, following my always cautious chief financial officer's instinct, I had substantially diversified my investments, accounts abroad, investment funds and other names, shares in companies they did not even dream existed. 3 days later, I signed the divorce papers. I divided the visible assets exactly as determined by Mexican law. Lucia got the house, half of the joint accounts, the standard alimony. The children received some company shares and access to a fund I had created years before. They thought they had won the lottery. They did not know they had just lost the game. The day after signing the papers, I did something no one expected. I disappeared. Not literally, of course, but for Lucia, Bruno, and Monica, it was as if I had evaporated from the face of the earth. I canceled my phone, closed my social media accounts, and moved to a small cabin that I bought in a hurry in the interior of Chihuahua, near Creel. A 4-hectare property in the middle of nowhere, with no curious neighbors, no questions. They tried to contact me, of course. In the first few days, my old phone rang constantly. Desperate messages from Lucia. Ricardo, we need to talk about the details of the alimony. Bruno left messages. Dad, where are you? We have some questions about the company funds. Monica was more direct. Dad, this is ridiculous. You cannot just disappear. But I could. And I did exactly that. Summer, autumn, winter. The seasons passed in absolute silence. While they were looking for Ricardo Herrera, the hurt and betrayed man, I was transforming into something completely different. My experience as a chief financial officer had not disappeared with the divorce. In fact, for the first time in decades, I could apply it completely for my own benefit. I set up a small office in the cabin, 3 monitors, satellite fiber optic connection, and all the tools a professional investor needed. I started small, day trading, analysis of emerging markets, investments in tech startups. My advantage was obvious. 30 years of reading financial statements, identifying solid companies, and separating the wheat from the chaff. In 6 months, I had doubled my initial capital. In a year, I had tripled it. Cryptocurrencies were booming at that time, and my conservative analysis kept me away from the traps that destroyed so many amateur investors. While others lost everything on meme coins, I built solid positions in blockchain companies with real fundamentals. But money was only part of the equation. The real project was Ricardo Herrera 2.0. I started to take my health seriously. Gym every morning, hikes on the trails of Chihuahua, a balanced diet. At 63, I was in better shape than at 50. I let my beard grow, bought clothes I really liked instead of those corporate suits I wore for decades. I learned to play the guitar, something I always wanted to do but never had time for. And it was on one of those morning walks that I met Clara. She ran a small bookstore in Creel, a 52-year-old woman with natural gray hair and a smile that lit up any room. Divorced too, no children, but with a genuine passion for life that I had not seen in years. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours, talking about books, travel, dreams we had abandoned along the way. You have an interesting energy, she told me on our 3rd date. You seem like someone who went through something difficult but came out stronger on the other side. She was not wrong. Clara and I got married in a small courthouse in Creel after 8 months of dating. Nothing extravagant, just the 2 of us, 2 witnesses, and the certainty that we had found something real. 6 months later, we adopted Sophia, an 8-year-old girl whose biological parents had lost custody due to neglect. Seeing Clara taking care of Sophia, seeing the pure love in that little girl's eyes, showed me what I had lost in Guadalajara, but also what I had gained by losing it. Meanwhile, my investments continued to grow exponentially. 2 of the startups I financed were acquired by Silicon Valley giants. My stock portfolio generated monthly dividends that exceeded my old salary as a chief financial officer. I bought land, commercial properties, stakes in private equity funds. In 3 years, my fortune was greater than it had been during my entire marriage with Lucia. But most importantly, I was genuinely happy. Sophia called me Dad, without hesitation. Clara looked at me every morning as if I were the best part of her day. We had built a simple but rich life. Family dinners, weekend trips to the mountains, nights playing Scrabble while Sophia did homework at the kitchen table. It was in the 4th year of my new life that the first sign came. My lawyer in Guadalajara called me. Ricardo, your ex-wife is trying to locate me. She wants to renegotiate the terms of the alimony. Apparently, she is facing financial difficulties. Financial difficulties? How interesting. And my children? I asked. They also made contact. Bruno mentions problems with his business. Monica, well, the boutique closed last year. She is asking for financial advice. I smiled for the first time in 4 years thinking about my old family. Dr. Perez, I told my lawyer. Please, inform them that Ricardo Herrera does not wish to be contacted. If they insist, you have authorization to take the appropriate legal measures to ensure my privacy. Understood. But, Ricardo, they seem genuinely desperate. I know, I replied calmly. It is exactly as I planned. It was time for the final phase of my plan to go into action. They had discarded me because they thought I no longer had value. Now they would discover exactly how much I was worth and how much it cost to lose me. The following months brought a symphony of desperation that I observed from a distance, like a maestro watching his most complex composition being executed perfectly. My lawyer, Dr. Perez, became my source of information about the collapse of my old family. Ricardo, he called one winter morning. I need to update you on the situation in Guadalajara. Your ex-wife, Lucia, is in serious trouble. Apparently, the other man, Marco, I found out his name was, had revealed his true nature a few months after my disappearance. He was not the successful businessman he pretended to be. In reality, Marco was a professional con artist who had identified Lucia as an easy mark, a recently divorced woman with access to a substantial amount of money. He convinced her to invest in his fictitious import company for $1,000,000 from the division of assets, plus $1,000,000 he had taken from the emergency fund I left her. When Marco disappeared with the money, Lucia discovered that the company did not even legally exist. The documents were forged, the office was rented by the month, and Marco Jimenez was not even his real name. She is living in a one-bedroom apartment in Tlaquepaque now, Perez continued. She lost the house in Las Lomas. She could not pay the mortgage without your supplementary alimony. Ah, yes, the alimony. Another aspect of my careful planning. When I signed the divorce papers, my official income was only my base salary from Industrias del Bajío. All my more substantial investments were structured through holdings and trusts that were not considered regular income. This meant that my alimony was calculated on a much lower basis than Lucia expected. She had planned to live comfortably on the 25,000 pesos per month I was obliged to pay, plus the returns from the investments she had won in the divorce. But the investments she received were precisely those that I knew were about to devalue. Shares of Industrias del Bajío, for example. I knew the company was facing competitiveness problems that would become public only months after my divorce. The shares lost 60% of their value in the first year. The other investments I left for division were equally problematic. High-risk funds that seemed solid on the surface, but which I knew were artificially inflated. And my children? I asked. Perez sighed. Bruno invested heavily in a cryptocurrency startup that promised to revolutionize digital payments. He put in almost everything. The money from the division of assets, a loan against his house, even his own children's university fund. The company was a Ponzi scheme. He lost 8,000,000 pesos. Bruno was always impulsive, even as a child. He wanted the fastest results, the most obvious shortcuts. I tried to teach him about patience and careful analysis, but he always preferred to trust his own instinct over solid financial education. Now, that instinct had cost him the future of his own family. And Monica, the boutique, went bankrupt last year. Apparently, she expanded too quickly. She opened 2 additional stores without enough capital to sustain the growth. When the pandemic hit, she was paying rent on 3 premium locations in Polanco without enough income to cover the costs. She has debts of approximately 4,000,000 pesos. Monica, my daughter, who always wanted the best and most expensive of everything. I had financed her first boutique precisely because I knew she did not have the temperament to build a sustainable business. She only saw the glamour of being an entrepreneur, not the brutal numbers that determine success or failure in the retail market. They are looking for you with more urgency now, Perez continued. Lucia called my office 17 times last week. Bruno sent a 3-page letter explaining his situation and begging for a conversation. Monica is offering apologies and promising she will never again be part of any conspiracy against you. Conspiracy? What an interesting word. They finally admitted that the retirement party had been a trap. Ricardo, they are really desperate. Lucia mentions she is considering declaring personal bankruptcy. Bruno may lose his house. Monica is living with her mom in the apartment in Tlaquepaque. I listened to all this while watching Clara and Sofia playing in the yard of our house. Our new house, actually, a 200-hectare ranch that I bought the previous year with a view of the Sierra Tarahumara. Sofia was teaching Clara to ride a horse in our small stable. Their laughter echoed through the valley. Dr. Perez, I said finally. They can keep trying to contact me, but my position remains unchanged. Ricardo Herrera does not wish for communication with those people. I understand, but Ricardo, what if they try to locate you physically? Lucia mentioned hiring a private investigator. I smiled. They are welcome to try, but they will find that Ricardo Herrera from Guadalajara, Jalisco, no longer exists in the public records. The man they are looking for disappeared 5 years ago. It was true. I had officially changed my residence to Chihuahua, reorganized all my businesses through complex corporate structures, and even altered some details of my civil registration. Not illegally, of course, just taking advantage of the complexities of the Mexican legal system that I knew very well after 3 decades as a chief financial officer. But Ricardo, are they your family? No, I replied, watching Sophia run towards the house shouting, Dad, Dad, look what I learned. My family is here. Those people in Guadalajara are just an expensive lesson I paid about trust and loyalty. It was time to send a final message to close this chapter of my life forever. It was a spring morning, exactly 5 years after my retirement party, that I decided to definitively close this chapter of my life. Clara was making pancakes in the kitchen while Sophia practiced piano in the living room. Classical music resonated through the house. Chopin, one of the pieces she was learning for the school recital. I was watching this perfect domestic scene when my phone rang. Dr. Perez, once again. Ricardo, I need to inform you about a development. Lucia is in the hospital. My first reaction was nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not worry, just a curious emptiness where 3 decades of marital emotions used to exist. What happened? I asked out of politeness. Apparently, she had a severe anxiety attack. She is being treated for depression and extreme financial stress. Bruno called my office crying. Ricardo literally crying. He is asking for just 5 minutes of conversation with you. He says he needs guidance on how to save his family from complete bankruptcy. I looked at my own family. Clara smiled at me from the kitchen. Sophia waved at me from the music room. 5 years ago, I was just a man who had dedicated his entire life to people who saw me as a walking ATM. Today, I was a father, a husband, a mentor to Sophia, a real partner to Clara. Dr. Perez, I want you to send a letter to each of them. The same letter. Can I dictate it now? Of course. I took a deep breath. Dear Lucia, Bruno, and Monica, the man you discarded 5 years ago no longer exists. What was left, did not forget. You judged me as an old, worthless retiree. You have now discovered how much that miscalculation cost. There will be no second chance, no reconciliation, no financial rescue. You made your decisions based on greed and convenience. Now live with the consequences. Sincerely, Ricardo Herrera. Is that all? Perez asked, surprised. No. Include a photo. That afternoon, Clara, Sophia, and I posed for a professional photo in front of our house. Not the initial cabin, but the 200-hectare property I bought in the 3rd year of my new life. A stone and wood mansion with a panoramic view of the mountains. Stables in the background, the Tesla Model S parked in the circular driveway, and the small plane I bought for our weekends in Mazatlan. In the photo, I was wearing jeans and a denim shirt, clothes I would have never considered in Guadalajara. Clara was radiant in a simple summer dress. Sophia was holding our golden retriever, Duque, whom we adopted the previous year. We were all smiling genuinely. On the back of the photo, I wrote by hand, Herrera Family, Chihuahua, 2024. Built on love, not on money. 3 weeks later, Perez called me again. Ricardo, your letter had an impact. Lucia tried to call my office 46 times on the first day. Bruno sent a 12-page response that, honestly, I could not finish reading. It seems more like a confession of guilt than a letter. Monica, well, Monica appeared personally at my office in Guadalajara. What did she say? That you had won, that they finally understood it was never about money for you, but about respect and loyalty. She wanted me to convey that they are proud of the man you became, but they know it is too late. Proud. What a fascinating irony. Did she say anything else? Yes. She asked if you were really happy. When I showed her the photo, she was silent for almost 5 minutes. Then she said, he looks 20 years younger. I never saw him smile like that when he lived with us. Monica was always the more perceptive of the 2 children. Apparently, she had finally understood that the man they knew in Guadalajara was not really me. It was just a version of me, shaped by decades of responsibilities and expectations that were never reciprocated. Ricardo, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you feel any satisfaction in their suffering? I considered the question carefully. Satisfaction, no. Relief, absolutely. For 5 years, I carried the anger and betrayal like a stone in my chest. Today, that stone is gone. Not because they are suffering, but because I built something better. It was true. Watching their collapse did not bring me joy, it brought me closure. Proof that I had made the right decision by disappearing, by rebuilding, by choosing genuine love over toxic obligation. Is there any possibility you might reconsider? Even though they made a mistake, they are your biological family. Dr. Perez, family is not defined by DNA. It is defined by daily decisions of love, respect, and loyalty. Clara chooses to love me every morning. Sophia chooses to call me dad. I choose to protect and nurture these people. That is family. And Lucia, Bruno, and Monica, they chose to see me as a financial resource to exploit. They chose to conspire against me. They chose to discard me when they thought I no longer had value. Those were also family decisions, just not the kind that builds, but the kind that destroys. 6 months later, I received one last update from Perez. Lucia had moved into a government-subsidized assisted living home. Bruno got a job as an accountant at a small company in Puerto Vallarta, slowly rebuilding, but without ever recovering his previous standard of living. Monica went back to university at 42, studying to be an elementary school teacher. They survived. That was all I wanted to know. Today, 2 years after sending that letter, I wake up every morning in a house full of laughter, plans, and genuine love. Sophia, now 15, is applying to universities with a full academic scholarship she earned on her own merit because Clara and I taught her that real achievements come from effort, not from inheritance. Clara expanded her bookstore to 3 cities in Chihuahua and is considering writing a novel. I, at 67, am happier than I ever imagined possible. My fortune continues to grow, but now it serves a different purpose, not to impress or support people who see me as a means to an end, but to build a real legacy with people who love me for who I am, not for what I possess. Sometimes, Clara asks me if I miss my old life. I always answer, you cannot miss something you never really had. The betrayal of Lucia, Bruno, and Monica was not just the end of a marriage and family relationships. It was the birth of the real Ricardo Herrera, a man who learned that the greatest revenge is not to destroy your enemies, but to build a life so full that they become irrelevant. They taught me that love cannot be bought, but it can be lost, that family is not a right, but a privilege, and that sometimes the best response to betrayal is not anger, but the indifference that comes from a genuinely well-lived life.